Hey folks, welcome back. In the previous episode, we looked at various tips and techniques to help keep a low profile when out stealth camping. One of the main giveaways when camping is having a campfire. And so it's often best to pack a small portable stove, not only for the convenience of being able to pack it down fast, but also to save on weight and space inside your pack to make it as lightweight as possible. Here are my 5 favourite stoves that I use when stealth camping. Each one has its own benefits and drawbacks. I'm going to be testing each stove and seeing how long it takes to boil 500 millilitres of water. In order to keep the tests as even as possible, I'm going to use the same amount of water on each stove and use the same firelighters, which will be these eco-friendly firelighters by Fire Dragon. They are non-toxic, odourless and 100% natural. They also ignite and burn really well. If it's winter time, you'll often need the heat of a campfire to keep you warm after cooking some food. The problem is, a campfire is fairly obvious to spot, especially at night. When I need to cook food or boil water, and I'm in a fairly dense woodland, I will often use a twig stove. These simple metal stoves fold down quite small, and you fuel the fire by just putting small sticks and twigs in them. There are 2 main types I use. This first one is called the Silverfire Scout. It's a cylindrical shaped stove and packs down relatively small. There are 4 main sections to this stove. First is the base, which has small air holes in the bottom. Then there is the actual burn bowl and ashtray, which also has small holes in the base to allow for airflow. This burn bowl then sits inside the second section of the stove, which sits on top of the base. You will notice there are small holes in the top of this section too. This is to allow for secondary combustion of any gases that are given off from the fire whilst the wood is burning, also known as a double burn stove. It's highly efficient and burns with a really clean flame with very little smoke. The final section is the pot stand for your pot to sit on. Just ignite the firelighter and then add small twigs. Within 20 seconds or so, the sticks will ignite and the fire will begin to grow. If you need to add larger sticks, you can take the pot stand off to open up more space to allow for more sticks to burn. Before I put any pots on top of the stove, I make sure to try and get it burning well to begin with. This does mean that there can be a fairly large flame to start with, but it soon burns down once a pot is placed on top. I'm going to use this cook pot from the BCB Crusader cook system for the majority of the testing on this video. Once the pot is on the stand, I put the lid on and start the timer. With these types of stoves, it's important to keep feeding sticks in to begin with, as it helps to keep a continuous flame. After a few minutes, you can see the fire is burning with a really clean flame and barely any smoke. This is because those small holes in the top chamber are creating a secondary burn and burning the smoke that is given off by the flame. The time it took to boil water on this test was 6 minutes and 58 seconds, which isn't bad, but I've boiled water faster in it before. So what are the advantages of this stove? Well, it's really light, weighing in at just 387 grams. It burns with a really clean flame due to the secondary combustion, and it packs down fairly small. The disadvantages are that once the pot is on top, you don't have much room to feed larger sticks in, and so you are limited to only using small twigs, which means you do need to feed the fire more regularly. Another efficient twig stove that I use is the stainless steel firebox stove. It's built like a brick, but incredibly solid. So unlike the Silverfire Scout, this one completely flat packs, which is ideal for saving space in your pack. It comes in a tough Cordura case, and also has a second cloth case inside, so the dirt and soot doesn't get everywhere. There is also a second pot stand for round pots, which helps to concentrate the flame directly underneath for a more efficient boil time and a sturdier stand. The stove is all hinged together in one piece, so you just remove the 2 metal pot stand hooks and fold it out. There is a separate ashtray which just slides underneath and sits on a small shelf to keep the ash and fire off the forest floor. On one side, there is a small vent, which you can fold up or down to adjust the airflow into the fire. There are a number of small slots all around the stove, so that you can place your pot stand hooks at different heights, depending on how much fire and fuel is inside. But personally, I just sit them on the top 2 notches. I gather a few twigs and small sticks, light up a fuel tablet and start building the fire. This firebox has a larger area for a fire, so I can add more fuel and larger sticks than the previous cylindrical stove. Again, within a few minutes it's burning well, and so now I place the pot hooks on top. add the 500 millilitres of water into the pot and start the timer. I add sticks every now and then as the flame burns down, but I don't need to add sticks as often as the previous stove because I can add thicker sticks which burn for longer. The main difference between this stove and the previous one, despite the obvious one being the shape, is that there is no secondary burn on this, so it's basically like a campfire in a box, hence the name Firebox. This stove took 4 minutes and 40 seconds to boil 500 millilitres of water, probably because I could add more fuel and heat to it as it had a larger area for a fire. So, the advantages of this stove is that it flat packs, boils water in under 5 minutes, and has a number of different adjustable heights for your cookpots. In addition to that, you can also build up a larger fire in it to keep you warm once your water has boiled. However, the disadvantages of this stove is that the flame is much more visible, and it is the heaviest of the stoves that I use, weighing in at just over 1,000 grams. It's worth noting though, that Firebox actually do a miniature titanium version of this one, which is tiny and weighs just 113 grams. I've personally never used this version, but if it's anything like the solid stainless steel one here, I'm sure it's a really awesome stove. Both of these are really good portable stoves, which I've used tons over the years. However, the downside of both of these when stealth camping is that they generally need a fire built inside to boil water, and so an alternative option I use to be extra low profile is this, the BCB Crusader Mark II cook set. It is a stove, cook cup, drinking cup and water bottle all in one cook set. It comes in this Cordura case which has molly webbing on the back so you can attach it to your backpack. I'm not using the 58 pattern NATO water bottle that it comes with, so I took this out for this video. But all the components nest inside each other, and in the base is an area where you can place a Trangia alcohol stove. To light this stove, you fill it with methylated spirits, which is odourless and burns with an almost invisible flame. I fill the Trangia stove with this liquid, then place it into the base of the Crusader cook set. It's highly flammable, so just a spark from a lighter is often enough to ignite it. You can see it burns with a flame that is barely visible. As this flame ignites so quickly, you can get the pot over it as soon as it has been lit. So I fold over the pot stand arm and place the metal cup on top, then start the timer. You can see that even from a distance, the flame is barely visible and there is no smoke whatsoever. This is great if you want to keep a low profile when stealth camping. Once I've lit this stove, I'll often just leave it and carry on with other camp tasks while it boils the water. Now, as the flame is only small, it does take a longer time to boil water. In this case, it took 10 minutes and 53 seconds, which is twice as long as the other twig stoves. The advantages of this stove setup is that it burns with an almost invisible flame and there is no smoke or odour when it burns, which means it doesn't give you away as much as a twig stove would. It is also convenient that the entire cook set can be nested in one carry case. You have your stove, your cook cup, your drinking cup and water bottle all in one case. The disadvantages are that it does take over 10 minutes to boil water, and it's also slightly on the heavier side, weighing in at around 855 grams without the water bottle. Still, it's a brilliant stove, and there's a good reason it's used by the British military. All of the previous stoves are great for their intended purpose, but one of the downsides of all of them is that they could be considered quite bulky to some people. And so, if it's super small, lightweight and minimal impact cooking that you are looking for, then you can't really go wrong with a Hexi stove. This is essentially a tiny metal box that is about the same size as a pack of cards. When you open it, it folds out into a tiny stove, which you would then place a solid hexamine fuel tablet inside to warm up and cook your food. It has been widely used in the militaries across the world, as they can be set up in emergency situations and used to cook military rations or MREs. Normally, I would use a solid Hexi tablet with this stove, but to try and keep the testing as even as possible, I decided to use a Fire Dragon EcoFuel tablet, which burns a little quicker. After about 5 minutes, I noticed that the tablet was starting to run out, so I added another one. Despite the fact that the tablets were enough to get the water really hot, after 11 minutes it wasn't enough to boil the water, so I called it a day on this test. A solid Hexi tablet would have been ideal, but I didn't have any on me. Either way, This stove has a number of advantages for stealth camping. It's incredibly small and can even fit in your pocket. It's also very lightweight, weighing only 103 grams, and once the flame goes out and your food is cooked, it doesn't take long for it to cool down, so you can pack it away faster if you need to break down camp and head off quickly. The downsides are that it takes a long time to boil water, even though it's aimed more at just warming food up. Once the flame has gone out, you can't really use it for heat, and often your cook cup sits fairly precariously on the top of it. It is more suitable for a mess tin. However, it's still a great option, and even one to take as a backup stove should you not wish to start up any of the other stoves when camping. There is also an even more minimalistic version of this stove which you can get in certain MREs, or meals ready to eat. Here's one from a Spanish ration pack which I used last year. You can see that it's totally flat packed. All I do is fold out the edges of the metal to create two legs, and then fold up the other edges which will house the small hexi tablet, on top of which I can place a tin can to warm the food or my pot of water to boil. The final option I use, and by far the quickest way to boil water, is a gas stove. The particular model I like to use is the Fire Maple FMS X1 camping stove. It has a high efficiency heat exchanger, which reduces wind and speeds up boiling times by around 30% more than a traditional backpacking stove. Inside the main 1 litre cook set is a small bowl for drinking or eating out of, the stove burner, and space enough for a small gas canister. Just attach the stove burner to the screw thread on the gas canister, and then attach the 1 litre cook pot to the top of the stove burner. It twists and locks into place to make it secure and prevent it from being knocked off. You can see the heat exchanger coils underneath the base of the burner. There is a small ignition button underneath, but for some reason this time I forgot to use it, and I just used the lighter instead. Once lit, just twist in the cook pot and put the lid on. This cook system took only 2 minutes 34 seconds to boil 500 millilitres of water, so it is by far the most efficient at boiling water. The advantages of this stove is that it can quickly boil 1 litre of water. In fact, the company states it can boil 1 litre in 3.5 minutes, which is still very fast. It burns with very little flame and no smoke. It's also titanium, so it only weighs 511 grams. Being titanium, it also cools down really fast, allowing for a quick pack away if you need to get on the go. The downsides is that it can be really quite loud, and you can't really use the heat of the stove to keep you warm in the colder months. All in all, it's a highly efficient stove, and probably one of the best ones for stealth camping due to the advantages far outweighing the disadvantages. And so there you have it, my top 5 stoves that I use and continue to use on various camping trips where I like to make minimal impact and enjoy some peaceful times in the woods. I will put a link to each of these stoves in the video description below for those that are interested. Thanks very much for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe and check out my other stealth camping episodes in the description box below. Cheers for watching folks, and I'll see you in the next one.